We've been talking about AI over the last few days, but today I want to take a little bit more of an institutional perspective, talking in particular about one of the major media buyers in the world and the ways in which they've moved very aggressively into using AI, talking about AI, and talking it up with Oscar Garza, who is another Austin native, but also an old friend of MediaPost. He's the managing partner at GroupM. He has been overseeing the activation of many of the major brands throughout the WPP agencies, and he's been working on the AI piece in particular over the last few months, and GroupM has been especially aggressive both in talking about it and projecting the importance of AI in all of its operations. I wanted to explore some of the implications of this and then also drill into the ways internally they're talking about AI and using it. Please welcome Oscar Garza. So I want to start. Here's our slide. This is a projection that that GroupM forecast in June that more than 2/3 of advertising revenue is going to be AI enabled. First of all, explain what does that mean? What's in that category of AI, and maybe walk us through some of the key channels that are really going to be predominantly AI driven that you guys are seeing. And this is by the end of this year you're talking about.
Yeah, we've been using AI for a long time
Right.
in advertising. So if we take the most broad definition of AI is, code that starts to alleviate, human work activities, right? Mm-hmm. So if we look at the range of artificial intelligence, you look at things like task automation or generating insights over large, complex data sets, that a human can't go parse and then figure out. That's been pretty typical of the space, the last several years, especially as you take those combination of those two things and turn them into things like optimization. So can I take live insights from data that is happening from, for example, a pixel fire and turn that into complex decision making that we've seen in the programmatic and search space for a long time. So dating as far back as you see 2015 or, in my experience back, into the early aughts. We've been using things like pixel-based, basic digital attribution and optimization for many, many years. I think the expansion of things like the insights has been interesting as we're getting more and more data from more and more channels. It's becoming more and more important for that to be automated because humans then can't look at the interactions between, digital out of home and linear television and search and then, understanding like, well, how effective was it? It's like, I still have clients that are asking me like, well, what is the click path between here, here, and here? Did 2 clicks and an exposure create a conversion? I'm like, we cannot look at that. We can't look at that way anymore. We have to have a machine look at all the interactions and parse, simulate all the different sort of combinations that could be possible, and then tell us like, okay, here's a distribution we can use, and then apply that. And then there's more advanced AI techniques like, if we have optimization and we have these insight generation that turns into like chatbots, like how am I interacting with someone in real time and like with that decision tree, and then assisting in a customer service environment, or things like generative AI. How do I use either language models to create words for you based on the information that I have at the time, or create creative pieces based on a source data set. And then in the very far right, which starts to leave the advertising sphere, you have things like human masking, so avatars, deep faking, things like that, or human augmentation, cybernetics, exoskeletons, what have you. And then way at the other end, you have like Android, like full human replacement androids, right? Mm-hmm. Which I don't ever want to get. The ethical implications increase as you go to the right. So we try to stay somewhere in the middle where it's like useful for our people, useful for our brands, making advertising more valuable.
Specifically talking out of this chart,
yeah.
Are there particular channels that are moving more quickly and adopting various pieces of this?
Yeah, the digital channels certainly. The digital channels spawn more data than we could possibly imagine, and more data than a human can handle, and therefore it requires that assistance. So the biggest bands here are things like search and other digital, which is the onset of programmatic and social, as you can see, since the 2015 or so, and so that comprises the vast majority. But the application of like the insight generation, for example, would apply to any channel, and so you have things like non-digital as a band here, because I need to feed, weekly linear data or radio data sometimes into a model to understand its effectiveness in the context of all the other channels. And so so we have this sort of as a generality, across our business. But I'd say for some very important campaigns or very important business units, the application of AI is 100% on that business because we're using it to understand the totality of our marketing touch points, and then also do things like optimization.
One of the projects that you guys did earlier in the year was announce your maturity model project, which is sort of a consultancy, an AI consultancy to the brands. And it's kind of, when I was looking at it, it was raising the question to me, how do these technologies and the quick evolution of these technologies change the relationship between the agency and their clients?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think we had to organize ourselves around a maturity model to understand how we were using AI because it's been buzzwordy the last year or two, and clients come to you and say, well, how much are we using AI? It's like, well, actually, we use a lot of AI. We've been using AI for decades, actually. So, where do we put you on that sphere, though? So we have a lot of brands where platform-based optimization is a reality, and it has been for a long time. And so that's an easy table stakes one because everybody's got to do optimization. But when you start to do things like, well, do you have a comprehensive data lake where you have all of your marketing touch points in a place where we can run that unsupervised machine learning analysis across all these things? Maybe not. So that's going to get you to the next step. And then finally, are you doing things like client services chatbots? Are you doing things like how much of the Google stuff are we using? How much of the Google stuff are we not using? Because that's important too. And so we grade ourselves. We have our partners grade us on our usage, but we have to have guidelines too. It's like there are places where we don't go because of either ethical concerns or a lack of transparency, even in spite sometimes of business performance. But we have a response. We do two things as a media agency, goldfish or not, Corey, wherever you went, is to spend our clients' dollars responsibly and then make sure that our dollars spent are making our brands grow. And so that combination, I think is the center of the AI conversation is how do we balance the ethical concerns of the source material for things like generative AI versus business impact.
One of the other things that you guys did this year is have some major partnerships with the major platforms that are enabling this, in particular Google in the spring. I want to shift the same question over to the platforms. Platforms have always had various degrees, and certainly in recent years, of black boxes that seem to be running more and more the buy side and the sell side, which seem to be creating, as I talk to more people from the holding companies, a lot of conflicts that they're wondering about. And I'm curious how AI, as it is becoming a bigger part of the buying, planning, and optimization part, how is this changing your relationship to the platforms?
I mean, I'll be perfectly transparent. I've been a big client of Google's for a long time, and Google has been one of my biggest clients forever. But when you have salespeople come and they say, well, we got this, and that, and then we got PMAX, and I'm like, look, folks, there's a lot of stuff that I can use of yours that I can then, articulate the effectiveness to my client in a very transparent way, and there's some things that I cannot. And if you look at things like the analytics reports in the last, year and a half or so, there's been a lot of some murky stuff in there, and I cannot put my clients in a position where their names are going to show up. Mm-hmm. And the analytics reports are what they are. I mean, sometimes it's a little bit of well, that happened in less than 1% of my activities, so is it real or not? But at the same time, what they reveal is if you're not careful with some of these tools, you can put yourself in a bad position because machines, I mean, one of the biggest ethical concerns of AI is it's imperfect. It has no morals. It can't see the future. It does not fill in information this way a human can. So it requires a lot of supervision, and you cannot put all your eggs in that basket if you don't know what's going to happen.
Well, are you also, beyond, say, safety and placement, are you also worried about double dipping on the part of the platforms? They're more and more eating the process of the buy side. They're taking over and putting into black box. They're asking you to trust them. And how much transparency are you getting into whether the algorithms are favoring their own properties? Because they're buyer and seller in the same box now.
This is so. I mean, I think it's pretty funny. The way that we've evaluated DSPs, for example, over the course of the last 15 years or so, has pendulum swung between, well, I don't want you to have proprietary inventory or data because that creates a bias. And so we ruled out platforms like Rocket Fuel that got blown up many years ago. And then today it's I have to evaluate you based on what your proprietary inventory or data is, because that sets you apart from the other DSPs. Otherwise, like, what are we talking about? The DSP does the same thing every time. If it's just a rule-based, buying platform, like, why don't we skip directly to the SSPs? And I think that's gonna be an evolution we're gonna see over the course of the next year as we go away from allowing platforms to have the proprietary data or inventory. So, but that's part of our evaluation is like, will you tell me like when this is happening? Can we study the auction dynamics so that we understand who's getting priority or not? Or can we buy through an SSP that's going to give us that transparency?
Well, what's the answer been so far?
It depends on the client. Some clients really care about it, and some clients really don't.
Well, from the platforms, as you're demanding more transparency about where they're, which inventory is getting favored.
I mean, that's why I tend to stay away from stuff like the former AdWords product and more into the DSP, where I have access to an SSP that can tell me what's actually happening at the auction. AdX is a concern sometimes because like that is in the Google house, and like we need to be able to separate some of those things. Sometimes they answer questions, sometimes they don't. But like, if I rack too many concerns, then I start to not trust it, and I'm going to go in different directions. So I have clients that are like, we're sitting through the trial right now, and clients are like, we need to move away from Google. I'm like, I don't disagree. We just need to put some standards as to why we would move, away from it. And again, like balancing the responsibility with the business performance. There are some places where we just cannot go because there's zero transparency, and there's some places where it's like works well enough, we know enough, we still got to grow your business. We have a job to do.
Okay, well let's move away from that because it sounds like this is going to be a mess for a long time, and probably. In all the many years that you and I have both been doing this and covering it and you doing it, digital has always been from the early programmatic days, this same kind of mess. Let's dig into the ways in which you guys are dealing with this internally. How are you breaking AI down internally, both talking internally but also with your clients? Think basics like AI versus machine learning. The ways in which generative AI versus some of the shinier, more AI powered objects right now.
Yeah, so I kind of split out some of the categories earlier between the task automation of kind of road activities and the absorption of information. I'd say that the absorption of information would be that subset of AI that is machine learning. So if that's on the my left side, we call that sort of conventional AI, and then when you get to the right side, where it's much more recent and some of this stuff like large language models and generative AI and stuff like that, what we call shiny AI. That stuff starts to require specific use cases to be useful. I think a lot of people rush to the shiny AI to do something fun and cool because it's shiny, but that's not built on a core manual use case that is going to improve the work or the business, right? So I think that's how we're trying to separate it for the clients is like, here's stuff we've been doing for a long time, recognize it and put it in the bucket, great. Here's stuff that is an opportunity because we've been doing it manually and we have a use case for its automation, and we'd like you to either pay for it or co-fund it or allow us to do it. And sometimes that removes some transparency, but at the same time it gets you the efficiency that you're looking for. And then when we get into the right side is like, okay, now let's sit down, let's really figure out what your use case is to have deep fakes in your ads. Like, well, maybe we do that, maybe we don't.
Where are you seeing the most impact in the buying and planning process? Where are you seeing the most impact right now? And what has been accelerating most quickly?
Yeah, I would say that the analytical models that we're applying somewhere between media mix modeling, which is a semi-annual observation of modeling to sales, and day-to-day optimization, which we can do with things like attention metrics or even optimizing to a pixel and stuff like that. The space in between is vast. And that's where we're applying a number of models to understand, well, what does investment in an attitudinal outcome do to the growth of your business? Well, we have a consideration modeling approach that requires a lot of brand health metrics at the channel and campaign level, annual metrics, put that into a model against things like weekly spends or macroeconomics or things like that, and that'll tell you, okay, well, you were responsible. You launched a product that popped you on brand health. It wasn't necessarily because of advertising, but here in these places we see that it was because of advertising, and now we can attribute it and we can refactor our budgets. And then we have things like monthly fast MMM measures that give us updated forecast on performance against campaign metrics. So we have forecasting that we can follow. We can do budget allocation at the tactical level given that we have enough data. And so this is where it starts to differ between the size of client, even within clients, the size of campaigns or the size of business units, is the more data you have, the faster and more granular you can be with your decisions, which is great. But like I said, that space in between, our conventional optimization, which we've been doing for a long time, and MMM, which we've been doing for even longer, is being filled with a really interesting space around that data observation and then the complex decision making with using AI.
How are you using the LLMs to do better and deeper segmentation and customer profiling?
Yeah, I would say our data and analytics unit, Choreograph, now within GroupM, is just soaking up a lot of that space right now. So we have clients where we take on and they have good or average segmentation. It starts with a great comprehensive data set, and then understanding the consumer, and then breaking that down into value segments, and then aligning that with things like what that audience really is in real life. And I think that's hard sometimes. Third-party data sets have been historically unreliable about what they actually are, because they've been modeled to heck, and they're not what it says on the label anymore. And so sometimes, in my experience, like I'll see an audience pop in a DMP back in the day, and it's like, oh, that's really interesting. Dog walkers, did really good for this brand. It's like, well, when I look into the actual contents of that, and it's been modeled so much, like they're not really dog walkers anymore. It's like some other audience. So our tools now are much better at peeling apart the data elements of what is actually real and deterministic versus what was probabilistic, and then turning that into usable information from an audience strategy perspective. What kind of people should we be attracting and interested in? And then a data strategy perspective. Specifically, what are the creative and media addressable data elements that we can use for optimization, creative triggers, further learning?
One of your colleagues who I saw interviewed recently talking about AI at WPP dropped the terms that they thought hyperscale and hyper-personalization were going to be key attributes of AI, the things that are really going to be important to the application of AI to marketing. And it raises, this question came up earlier when we were talking about personalization in AI. Because traditionally we've talked about personalization as to some degree diminishing returns. You can overdo it. But it strikes me that AI is exactly the tool that maybe changes that equation, because it makes it possible to do it perhaps more affordably and with fewer resources. But tell us about the ways in which you see AI driving, and to what degree it drives greater personalization, and where.
Well, I'll take the 2 points you made. One, hyperscaling. I think these tools allow us to operate beyond human capability in many cases, which is interesting and potentially useful, right? So the things like the analysis of the data at scale, fantastic, right? That still requires observations, because the insight that a machine can draw could be potentially very harmful. And then when we allow it to do the hyper-personalization beyond our ability to supervise, we're reaching unethical, right? So Andrew Chabert, who was a co-founder of Essence back in the day, hi Danielle, he did a talk about the ethics of AI. And he said, I'm selling, razor blades for shaving. Fantastic. Go run, an audience analysis. Tell me what's going to pop. It comes back with an audience that is focused on self-harm. Now, if I allow the machine to take over the hyper-personalization and run it across a bazillion ads and, $1 million without supervision, that's awful. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have to we have these ethical concerns. We have to be, I think, minding the store when it comes to personalization. I think personalization is facing a lot of challenges right now, in that the deterministic, identity is waning. If we're going to lose cookies, we're already regulatory challenges with GDPR. iOS has already shut down a bunch of stuff. The browsers are changing their minds. Google and Amazon and Facebook, and they can all change their minds tomorrow, and then the notion of identity starts to go away. We'll be relying so much more on probabilistic measures for audience that it's even more concerning, because we're having a machine determine what the audience is, and the machine determine how to optimize to it and provide the creative. Or if you're using generative AI for creative, it could create something, again, super awful, because we said, well, I need 10,000 ads tomorrow. Push the button. That's super easy. But then, I don't know what it's going to create.
Let me pick up on your last word, creative. And I know this is something that we talked about when we were prepping for this, was the role of creative with particular segments, and how AI is going to be particularly important for particular clients and segments, especially on the creative side. So I think we use the example, I think this is a good one, is CPG. And to talk about the role that you see AI playing for creative at all different levels for a segment like CPG.
Yeah, we're taking it slow. I would say that ad copy testing and search is the place where it is most easily supervised. So I would say the role out there is where I'm focusing a lot of my time and doing testing. When it gets to the actual creative production is where, we have a lot of smart people thinking about it. When I sit down at those tables, I voice my ethical concerns. And as long as we have a machine that's not going to spit out something awful, which is a huge concern, but also that we're not sourcing from material that is potentially copyrighted and plagiarizing good work from someone else, like that's also an ethical concern we should have. So if certain criteria are satiated, then yes, we should probably do some testing, but not at the expense of our morals, not at the expense of somebody else's work, and not at the expense of people's jobs. Like we still need people in the creative space to do smart things that machines can't.
One of the charts that Joe had earlier in the week showed where there was the most investment going on in AI among brands and agencies, and it was marketing. Marketing was the top bar. Right next to it, just barely smaller, was legal. And I'm curious, because it seems as if you've already kind of raised the topic. How is this changing your relationship with legal?
Not yet, but I have a lot of friends who are lawyers, and they are dabbling in some of these language models, and they're saying that, like, for very simple, briefs, motions, things like that they can generate, a 2-3 pager, no problem. But we've already seen challenges with that on the national news stage, right? Like, we have lawyers that are submitting motions that are written by AI that are completely incorrect. Right? Without supervision, you're going to get yourself into a lot of legal trouble, even if you're a lawyer. So, again, like any application of AI requires this human supervision to make sure you're not doing a bad thing, while it should automate the most simple things that we do.
I want to open up for questions. I know, Corey, you've got questions.
Is this thing working? Yeah, there we go.
Hi.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Yeah.
All right. You and I have been in this business a long time. In some ways, I joke that we're closer towards the future and ending than when we started, okay? Do you think the advancements in AI are good, bad, or indifferent for the long-term future of ad agencies?
I think it's bad for the future of large advertising agencies. I think a lot of what we do is to be able to operate, major clients at scale, and that requires a lot of people. I mean, to the degree that we start to not require a lot of people to do some of these basic things, then do these large agencies need to exist anymore? It really comes down to buying smarter rather than buying bigger, and that was the Essence tagline for a long time before we got acquired by GroupM.
We may not be around to see the future of it, but yes. Any questions on this side or that side? Yeah. Oh, good. Perfect. Right here.
I'm Sid from WPromote. Where do you see the biggest gap between expectation and reality? Like, there's a lot of talk. Like, we're so excited. Every agency has a roadmap. Every client has a roadmap. But then there's also like a gap in understanding of what this can do. And
Yeah, I think the biggest gap is our client education is, what are we doing with AI? What are we doing with AI? What's the next thing with AI? How much more can we do AI? It's like, we're doing a ton. We're already doing a whole lot. Like, and we could be doing, and the stuff I want to present to you to do AI is super, super boring. And you don't want boring. You want super nice and flashy, and you want chatbots. I'm like, but I just want a data lake to do like super nerdy stuff. And that will propel your business forward tremendously. It'll make my job a lot easier, but you don't want to do that. You want something way up here.
Oh, got a question in the back. I'm coming. The last time I did this, I said, hey, remember Phil Donahue? And I didn't know he passed away the week before. So, Phil Donahue.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Hi, Oscar.
Hi, Danielle.
So there's a lot of risks with AI. We talked about them, a lot of things we need to watch out for. But to the point you just made, what are the best applications you've seen of AI, or ways that it can enhance what agencies are doing, maybe take away some of that low value work to make more room for higher order thinking, or how it can inspire creativity versus replacing people to create ads instead.
Yeah, I mean, removing a lot of the rote behavior in things like campaign automation, reporting, campaign setup, QA, things like that. I think, taking stuff off the table is super important. It allows our people to do the more strategic thinking. Like, actually think about the business, not think about, like, how do I get stuff out today? Like, we have an 8-day SLA for trafficking for reasons. It's because we as an agency have to spend your dollars responsibly. There's a lot of QA in there to make sure that we're mitigating risk. We don't talk about how agencies mitigate risk as a point of value. We expect that, and whereas Coco, like we're talking, like we can't be sending you changes like tomorrow on a public, change it tomorrow as a publisher. Like there are implications, from a risk perspective. So like, how do we take that stuff off the table so we do more important thinking? The same with like insight generations. Like I can spend weeks on a single report for a single week of activity and try to draw out like what the hell happened. But if I don't have the full context of like, well, what did my competitors do? What happened in these markets on that day? Like, what was the weather like? Like, I can't do that, but a machine could potentially do that and say, hey, look, this popped probably because of this. Hey, great, that's an insight. Can we put that into the rest of the context of what happened in that campaign and like tell our clients like how media performed for their business, how marketing is doing for their business? Then great. So yeah, I think it's going to hopefully make our people do more strategic thinking, but at the same time, like the more we take away the nitty-gritty stuff, the less they're going to understand how stuff works, and the ability to draw insight will become harder and harder. And so we're at an interesting point in time, I think, in this industry where the leadership for our agency, and I'm seeing some of the leadership of our clients, like they came from hand-on-keyboard sort of activity, where if you don't understand the way that programmatic works, you don't understand the way that search and social work, like from a very granular, like I call it the atomic level of advertising, then it's very hard for you to understand like why some of these changes are important or good. Are we going to skip past that too fast? And then we're going to have, is marketing leadership going to be effective in the future? Because like, okay, the machine told me X, great. Like, let's keep going. Well, why? Well, I don't know.
It's a good place to end. Thank you so much for leading us forward as we ended the show. Thank you, Oscar. And that is a wrap. I want to thank all of our speakers over the last few days. Everybody came to play. I was really happy with how all the content worked out and the conversations that came out of it. Thank you so much for all your great conversations. And I'm going to turn it over to John to close us out.
Yeah, you bet. Great job. Big round of applause for these guys again. Thank you so much.